Got it.
Okay, you are now live.
All right, this is Senate Appropriations Committee, and we're still working through the House passed budget for fiscal year 2022. And we're up to section B 600, which is higher education, and it's the University of Vermont. Before we get started, I am planning to adjourn this afternoon at 2:30. Our pro tem has to leave, and also Senator Westman has to leave. And I would note that it's with a note of sympathy that we learned last weekend that Representative from Pat's wife died very unexpectedly of a heart attack. So Senator Westman's part of the Lamoille contingent to go to the event this afternoon in memory of Amy. So we send out our sympathy to one of our colleagues. Avram and I worked together for a number of years back in the social welfare days, a wonderful person, and Amy was wonderful and vivacious and talented, and so it's a real loss. So with that said, I'm going to just let people know 2:30. It's a beautiful afternoon. I'm surprised Senator Sears isn't out in his backyard enjoying the sun. But if we get done at 2:30, he'll be able to do that. So I'm going to have Stephanie pick up with B 600.
So B 600 is the UVM grant. It's a flat grant. The change is in FY22, we have fully phased down the global commitment investment that was required to be stepped down under the global commitment waiver that was renegotiated in 2016. So that's what you're seeing here. Basically flat funding and just the last step in the phase down of that disallowed investment.
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So just speaking to the note there about the one-time list for ARPA money for the Office of Engagement.
Yeah.
I do have some questions, and I understand that we're reserving those discussions for later. But there's a related piece in, I believe it's ACCD, where we had testimony about funding that would move to the Office of Engagement too. So I'm just flagging that I'm getting more information, and the ACCD list, I'm not sure whose piece that is, but I do have some questions about that $1 million that was.
Yeah, that's Senator Ballant. And I know you asked Commissioner Gresham about that. And so.
And it turns out ACCD wanted to use it one way and the House went another way. And so I'm trying to work that out. But my other thing about the Office of Engagement is their intention is to add it to the base budget down the line after the one-time funding. And so I think that's a discussion for later. It's not being added here, but just wanted to note that intention.
I know that that's the desire. I know that certainly last year, the thinking and for the appropriation was that this was to be startup until the office could generate revenues to support the work of that office. So I think that discussion of startup money versus base is one that we do need to have in terms of the capacity to take on another base expenditure and the long-term plan for self-sustainability of the office. So I know you've made both of those points. So we will, but I think to get clarity between the two that you're trying to do could be helpful for what was being proposed originally, why, what got changed, and exactly what the funding will be. And then the pro tem has the ACCD section, so I think that could be informative to her.
And I can connect with Becca. With that said, I'm okay with closing this out.
Okay.
This 600 section.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad with that said. So we're going to close that out, knowing that we have some related discussions further on. Vermont State Colleges. This is the House 7 General Fund consolidates supplemental grants into the base. Can you explain what the House did here, Stephanie?
So we have section B 602 and B 602.1 have been in the budget for a while. The House decided that $700,000, when we added it several years ago, we did it on a separate line. They folded that into the baseline, and then you see a new 602.2. This is where they're adding the new transformation $5 million to the state college budget. So they wanted the $5 million to be on its own budget line item. And so they decided that it would collapse the 700 into the main grant line for the state colleges and run the 500 as its own line item. It was, I don't know the why of it. It was just what they wanted to do.
Okay, so this, I think having that separate appropriation was something we might have done in the Senate.
700 was a decision in your committee when that 700 was added 4, 5, 6 years ago. The desire of the Senate Appropriations Committee was to have it be clearly supplemental aid. And so it run as a $700,000 item for several years, separate from the main grant line to the state colleges.
So
Stephanie?
Yep.
Sorry, Philip. I was going to say, so the question before us is, does it make sense to carry it as a separate appropriation at this point?
Well, I think the reason we did that was more flexibility in terms of revenue and how revenue was going. And so if we were to reduce something, it would be that 700,000.
Okay.
They're not reducing it. This was just.
No, I understand. No. If we were to reduce,
It makes it more
Line,
vulnerable
it
to,
makes it more vulnerable to, the revenue of the state of Vermont. If the revenue's not good, we're in another recession, that 700 might be the place you would put rather than going into the base appropriation.
I think probably the reason we did it also is because there was such a controversy about how much each system got, UVM,
Right.
and VSAC, et cetera.
Yep.
And it may have been a way of addressing a financial need specific to VSAC without somehow creating or reopening that whole debate that came with Chef about how to carve up the higher education pie. So I think that may have been part of why it was done, to keep the base even and add it. So Senator Baruth.
I wanted to just look at, so the transformation funding, and this is a question for Stephanie.
Yep.
I thought that the transformation funding, since it was limited in time, and I thought we were going to use one-time money for that. So
there is a transformation $20 million one time and a deficit $20 million in the one time list. For some reason, the House committee wanted to label this, because this is expected to be $10 million next year and $15 million the year after and 17.5 after that and forever after. So it's this line item is expected to grow, but they really wanted their desire was to see this addition to the base distinct from the existing base for some reason, and to label it transformation.
I'm getting confused because the transformation money that I remember was, it was, I want to say 20 million or 25 million. And it didn't grow in that way. It was, no, it was the savings that they were supposed to achieve were 5 million a year.
Yes,
Right.
and
Yes.
in their layout of their sort of pro forma 5-year financial picture, this line item is expected to grow. It is base money to the state colleges here in 602.2. This line item is expected to grow up to a $17.5 million total.
And that's consistent with the study recommendation.
But why, I'm just curious, why didn't they add it to the
It was, they just want to, I think that visually, they just want to see this distinct from the underlying base.
Okay.
And so that's why they did that.
And then theoretically, every year we'll continue this, and then one year we'll just drop it into.
Probably when you get to the 17 and a half, which is sort of the stuck point, that in this plan, it may change, a few years out, but the idea is that this will eventually grow to a 17 and a half total. And at that point, it would certainly make sense to fold it into the base, because that it actually is base funding. It's
But
part
if
of
it doesn't work,
Well, then we will have to go back and
no,
I'm
I
sure.
mean, I think that I would leave it like this, because my question, what if it doesn't work? And, they can't support all four camp,
Mhm.
four now, four or five campuses, and they can't support that. And the Community College of Vermont starts to go down because it's keeping the others afloat. So I think it's wise to keep this separate personally, because I have that, there's always, this is a grandiose plan to save the colleges. But as we're seeing throughout New England and the Northeast, I might add, colleges going under.
No, I think that's a fair point, and I don't have any problem with breaking it out. I think it does dramatize for anybody looking at the budget that we're expecting transformation, structural transformation, as well as just increased funding. So
listening to people, I would say that it does make sense, because what is happening here is such a clearly identifiable plan to stabilize that it keeps it separate and it makes it clear, because this is a path forward, but we don't know how it is all in outer years, what the world is going to look like, or the success. So I think if we're doing something specifically related to implementation of the plan, having it very visible does have its advantages. My question for that, so if we keep the 5 million very clear, that's part of that transformation plan, in section 602.1 supplemental aid, do people have any problem about consolidating in the way the House proposed doing it after this length of time? Well,
No.
I think the whole issue around base is probably a non-issue at this point, simply because of the way reality of today relative to the funding and the role and the that the different institutions play relative to different groups of students and mission and role. So my question is, shall we concur with the House on the collapse?
I'm okay with that.
I would.
Bobby?
Well, it's okay, but I just wanted to tell you yesterday, we had a hearing in Ag and Pat Moulton was testifying, and it rolled out of her like we're visiting here, how a lot of their problems at VTC was because the state wasn't putting in enough money into keeping the place going. And I had to remind her that I took offense to that we were dumping millions on top of millions into the system, and they'd better be getting their act together, not just out begging for money.
It's a two-way street. There've got to be some structural changes. And I think the other question that I have, and Phil, I know you're on the study committee, and that is they put forth a plan of funding that they thought was necessary to stabilize the system, but assuming that they were going to make structural changes, they were going to dispose of property, et cetera, downsize the footprint. There was a number of things that had to be done on the other side to address cost. And is there, one of the things I'm like saying, how do I know what action's been taken across systems? Did we actually sell property? Is it on the market? What have we done in terms of the University of Vermont's had a been the topic of a lot of discussion around what they've had to do relative to financing. But it would be helpful if we had in one place what the state colleges have done. I know I've heard the president of MVU talk about a very significant reduction in courses and staff. So my question is, do we have sort of a progress report in terms of how that system is actually identifying and implementing those changes, efficiencies, et cetera, as part of that transformation process?
Yeah, I can summarize a little bit and
No,
then,
I don't, I'm not asking you to. Are they actually giving us a report back succinctly that tells us in the last year, these are the actions that we've taken? I think this gets back to Bobby's question, and that is, it's not just a matter of giving us more money, but there was a responsibility on the other end to
why don't I suggest to them that they create a running document that they add to every month, that we have access to, and it'll show in near real time what they've got agreement to, what's underway, et cetera.
That I would find that helpful. I think people need some affirmation to go with the spending plan that that the desired work, what has happened, and how that looks like. So it may not have to be monthly, even quarterly, but some kind of routine update on the progress.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, and I know Bobby has something, but they've been engaged right now in getting positive votes out of the Board of Trustees to move ahead with these things. And then their one-time list, which I mentioned yesterday, they've put in for some coronavirus relief, ARPA money, and that includes, among other things, money for some of the technological changes they have to make.
And that's in addition to what the House gave?
That's what they're asking. It's not, no one has agreed to that, but they've, like UVM and the state colleges, they've got another, essentially another CRF list.
I see. Senator Westman, and then and then Bobby.
So in the one-time list, does this ask for ARPA money going for the second and third year out? Because this note says 3.5 years base increase, and it's 5 million for the first year. But is there a pot going to be held out of ARPA money going for the 2 years beyond that?
Well, that'll get into the one-time list.
Right. Well, but the note here is about that.
Yeah.
So,
and this goes back to my initial confusion. I thought the idea was to pay for the transformation with one-time money and to put it in a lump sum now, but have it doled out over a period of years. But the House obviously has the idea of ramping up the base.
It was both. It was both. You had to
both
throw the
are in here.
base. Yeah, you had to do both, Philip.
And I think we need to grow the base. I was just surprised to see it done this way.
So they put the 5 million in the one-time list. They put language in that says
no, 5 million's in the base. It is basically building the base increase recommended by the study committee. And it's a way of remedying what they have perceived as years of underfunding the system.
So this is 5 million in the base. How much is in the one-time list?
$61.5 million.
61. Okay.
For 3 different pots.
So it's
20 to fill a deficit, 20 to be stretched over 3 years, which is the transformation one-time money. That's parallel with the base money, and then $20.5 million for workforce.
Yeah, it's 100 plus with everything considered. And then,
on
as
top
I said,
of what you put in this current year to float.
And then, as I said, I don't want anybody to be surprised. They have a list of HVAC IT projects that they are hoping to get funded with
Anita,
ARPA money.
And how
Um,
much is that?
That's 23, I believe.
But that's at UVM, I think, not state.
No, no,
college.
no, state
Oh.
colleges also.
Okay.
UVM
Oh,
has
that's-
98 million on their list.
So,
And the independent colleges have 90 million.
Yep.
So my point is, we are getting a huge requests. And let me once again remind everybody that anything that we do on this side, we are going to have to accommodate within available funding within ARPA. And of course, we have the governor's proposal that has been put out publicly that assumes 372 million is going to be spent exactly as he's proposing. And his proposal included nothing for higher ed. It included
Yep.
nothing for a whole lot of things. So we are going to have to look at what is reasonable and how come to some kind of target of how much of that $1 billion in this first year makes sense to appropriate, and how much is in year 2 and year 3, either appropriated like the transformation money that was just referenced, or to be determined in subsequent budgets. So just keep that in mind. Yes, Senator Westman.
so, because I'm a little slow on figuring this. So it's 61 that's in here, does the deficit, does the transfer in the one-time list. And on top of that, they want another 23. So they're asking really for 84 million in one-time.
There's, if you look, there's also the workforce and opportunity grants.
Yep.
That's, I believe, on the one-time list. That's not including the 23 that they're putting forward.
You know, I think one of the things that we better do is we can close this out, but what we
Yep.
need is what have been the requests in total from the
Yep.
state college system?
There you
Because
go.
it's coming down incrementally, and we could use another 23 and we could
Yep.
whatever. And I'm
And-
just,
And I just want to be clear, the state college pro forma, multi-year pro forma did show continued need to ask for, they still show a gap. So they were going to ask for additional one-time money next year and the year after.
Yep.
And so the 23 million, it seems like it's a specific HVAC investment, which, I would hope would line up with whatever the capital
So
changes
yeah.
are, but.
and a piece of that, if it's IT, is it all needed this year? It would be nice to have all of this on one sheet.
It
To
is,
be-
I only brought it up. I know we're not discussing or prioritizing the one time here. I was just making it clear the scale of the asks that I've gotten that you will see on the one time list, which we'll discuss at some later point. But they haven't even gotten me the documentation on the 23. But I did have a conversation with Sophie about that. So
I think it's important to see what's in the base, in the increase, then here's what's asked for this year in the one-time list and what it does. And then what's not in the request is the 23 and the workforce opportunity pieces. So I get it all on one page so I can see it and be able to process that.
well, Rich, does that mean you wouldn't want to close this section out?
No, I'm fine with closing this section out,
Okay.
but I mean, in the overall, I think it's important to see what
Oh
the
yeah,
whole picture is.
absolutely. I wasn't planning to have us make any kind of decision. I was just letting people know the scale of the pieces you'll see.
okay. Well,
And-
needless
and
to
the
say,
tr-
it's pretty substantial, but we'll look at it in total on the
Yeah.
one time.
Well,
Bobby and then Dick.
Yeah, the selling of property for the Vermont colleges, they had a farm in Norwich that was given to them. It's 300 and some odd acre farm with beautiful barn and
Is that
houses.
the one that's been the controversy that they need to sell?
Yeah.
Yep.
And they they divided it. And they sold all but 6 acres of the land and the buildings. 6 acres in the buildings are one chunk, and the other 300 and some odd all went to the Upper Valley Land Trust. So now they got a farm with their buildings, a beautiful I'd say probably $1 million barn sitting on it with no land. They got 6 acres and it's all lawn. I mean, so hearing them talk about selling their property, if they sell it all like they sold that, they aren't going to do too well.
Well, if they, what did they do with the proceeds? But the other thing is the land
Who?
trust actually bought the land then, and why isn't it still in agricultural production?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't make a contract that was long-term that the land could be used with the farm. So now the guy that wants to buy the farm is arguing with the land trust. And the land trust said, well, we aren't interested in renting you that land. So, I mean.
They have another problem, which is the statute around the state colleges is so short. But
Mhm.
one of the things it does is it reserves to the state the right to fire
Dispose.
sale. So they're asking the education committees for a statutory change to allow them to more quickly move on these kind of things you're talking about, Jane.
Well,
I just
guess-
wanted to mention that. I just soon close this out, but
all right, well, we're getting into other areas.
Yeah.
Obviously, the question is, shall we get rid of that supplemental aid, fold it in? I think people are saying yes.
Yes.
And then keep a separate section that anything we do to support that transformation plan, both the
Yeah.
base and then we want to maintain separately. Senator Sears.
Well, as our contributions grow to the Vermont State College system, I just want to know who's overseeing our contributions to it and making sure that they're doing what they say they're doing. Because there's a lot of these situations out there, not the least of which is the Vermont Veterans Home, where you have a private board of trustees, you have state employees, and you have these situations where that private board is pretty much running things. So I'm not suggesting there's something wrong at the Veterans Home right now, but where is the oversight to make sure, like the farm that Bobby just mentioned, to make sure that they are in fact getting the best deal possible, that they are in fact transforming and not just, coming back 3 years from now and saying, oh, we missed the boat, we need 60 million.
That's why I wanted to have the quarterly reports.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they
Well,
need to.
Something needs, whether it's the administration, I don't know, but I feel like this is
Isn't this why we have legislators on the board?
but this is why we shouldn't have them on the board, because
Well,
they don't act in the interest of the state, they act in the interest of the university.
Well,
In my humble opinion.
well, maybe that's something the education committee really needs to grapple with, and that is around the governance and ultimately how you get accountability. Other than I hate to be like, it's almost like pensions. It's here's what the bill is, legislature, as opposed to who's been kind of overseeing. The system.
Who's watching the money?
But this is would this be part of that language or that looking at that statutory expansion of?
I definitely think the auditor, maybe it's the auditor of accounts. I don't, I'm not mentioning this because of Tim Ash. I'm mentioning this because I think somebody has to be overseeing the tremendous increase in state funding that's going on to make sure that they are actually doing transformation.
Mhm.
They are actually getting the best price for land they sell, et cetera. And Bobby's example is troubling. If there's nothing there,
Yeah,
what happened to the barn? You know,
Well,
you got
short
state
of
of the art barn. You know?
short of appointing a conservator, that you have to run everything through, I think our oversight as the Appropriations Committee is the proper place. We'll get reports from them. They'll come next year for their
Yeah,
next
but we
installment.
get 2 weeks to mark up the budget. We get to hear
Yes.
from them, come in and give us their dog and pony show. And then it's the same with every agency of state government, Phil. I don't feel,
Well,
that
at least the other parts of state government are overseen by a Secretary of Administration and the governor's
Yep.
office. So the accountability there is quite different than
a lot better.
when it's a board that is acting really on behalf of state government.
for the taxpayers of the state of Vermont.
Yeah, right.
For most of the time, if it goes through the governor's office, the Department of Finances goes through each one of their figures with a fine tooth comb. Where is that happening? You know,
Well, like I say,
I-
you could create an additional governance structure that sits between the legislature and the state colleges, but I would suggest to you that's not the way to get nimble transformation.
No, I don't think so.
I don't want that.
No,
Um,
but maybe putting some money into the auditor's office or some other place in state government.
I don't know as if this is an auditing function so much as which only occurs we are really talking about consistent monitoring, like
would-
happened frankly with the vets home until that kind of blew apart. And then remember Jim Reardon came in
Yep,
and the
right.
Agency of Administration really took a strong position and have been monitoring that very, very closely. And it seems like, which is an issue we aren't going to solve today, but I think what
Just
we're
one
But
last
it
thing I
needs
want
that
to.
you're correct, Jane. It needs that type of attention.
yeah.
Well,
Whether it
what
be the
we
agency
need
of
is a
administration.
controller that works for us, looking after our money, that we're basically giving it to a semi-private corporation. We don't own the state colleges. The state of Vermont does not own those colleges, but yet we're pumping millions. We need somebody looking after our money that we're giving them.
Well, I
to-
think that's what Senator Sears is really saying is how do we, on an ongoing basis, have assurances that someone is watching over how this progress is going, the financial health, where things are not going well, so it doesn't catch us necessarily. In other words, we have known the funding of the state college system has been a problem. We can't deny that. I mean, in terms of what we've done. But I think looking at the amount of money, even this year and what went in last year, which was also another 100 million, and some of it's COVID related, the investment and the importance of this system being operated very tightly and efficiently, and with the vision that's needed to support moving into the future, really needs organized and ongoing oversight, and where and how that should look, I think is an issue that we're not going to solve today. But I
No.
think that's, even as I was saying, at an interim, I'd like to have quarterly reports, but I think we need to talk to our education committee, because that's where they're having discussion around what kind of statutory language needs to be added here, because what we have is so minimal.
And also the language that the House created along with the funding, we haven't talked about that, but they've got language that articulates a whole set of metrics that they want to go along with this increased funding. So when you get a look at that, it's much tighter in terms of what they'll have to present to us than we've had before. It's not a controller or an independent overseer, but it is an understandable set of metrics that we'll be able to look at through this process.
Well, then maybe we need quarterly reports on using those metrics, as the framework.
And
We could
that
look
would be
at
the easiest way to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, okay. All right, when we get to that point. So what I'm going to suggest then is after all this, we will concur with the House, move the 700 into the base. Because obviously the base is that whole balancing is sort of out the window at this point in history. We're making it very clear. We'll add 602.2 because that keeps it very transparent. What the legislature has done relative to that transformational plan and recommended funding. And then we'll obviously have more discussion on one time. And then, so we'll close out 602.2, and then we'll go to allied health.
And we've always funded this program on a separate line item, and it has a global commitment fund investment associated with it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's why we did it, right?
Yep, that's why we broke it out to keep the.
But for what goes into allied health? Nursing, dental?
Dental hygiene, I think. Yeah,
Okay,
I think those are the two pieces.
I would think those are the two. All right, now we're down to VSAC.
And so what you see in that interdepartmental transfer line is the funding for, we talked about it a little bit yesterday, for Act 155, the primary care nurse and doctor funding. So this is the funding's in the Department of Health first, and then it's transferred over to VSAC.
But let me ask, this is one-time money.
So yes, the state match for it is one-time money. It's provided for 2 years. So they, in the House construct, they're appropriating $2 million, of which $1 million is for the match for year FY22 and $1 million for the match for FY23.
And they're doing it through interdepartmental transfer from VDH.
Yeah.
And VDH, they're getting the money from where?
It's global commitment. So it's a match dollar under the investment.
Now, where's the match?
The match is in the one-time general fund.
Okay. My question is, it seems like we're not very consistent between the one times and versus the base.
I mean, the match is in the one time. This is because it's an interdepartmental transfer was put here. You could actually appropriate it as a one-time interdepartmental transfer. You could appropriate the global commitment. It's a 3-step because it's global commitment. The dollars are appropriated to AHS first, then their global commitment in the Department of Health, and then they're transferred over to VSAC. That was the construct.
Maybe we could tighten that up a little bit. I
We'll
kind of
look at
like
the way
the
that
idea of
flowed. And I'll talk
rather
to the agents, Sarah Clark and VSAC, about where the appropriation should show up.
And I'm thinking, because it really is, although it's not one time, it's 2 time. A lot of stuff is 2 time. Maybe we should not. Maybe we should do it in the other section where we're dealing and make it very clear that these are. Yeah, that's
Great.
my only thinking about some consistency here when we're using either 1 or 2 time money. Okay, all right.
What was they took 100,000 out of the base? That the governor recommended a 2% increase or whatever.
Yeah, they. I don't know why they just decided to level fund to
Yeah,
last year's general fund amount. They didn't have a note beyond that.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Say lowered the base by $1 million.
100,000, but then they increased the transfer for the 2.2 million. So it looks like they increased it by 2.1 million, but actually
Unless we put the 100,000 in last year when we put that I don't know. We need to understand that better.
Yeah.
But
That's a good thing.
what the governor's $100,000 increase was compared
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
budget adjustment
Yeah.
baseline.
I think that's a good question to understand that.
Okay.
So we'll hold that open, and then, because we also want to look at how we want to handle these one-time within a different section versus making them. Last thing we want is anybody to think that's in their base. So Rich, what you got?
So I'm always reluctant to talk about the VSAC appropriation because I work there. But if you're cleared up on those two pieces, we appropriate through the Department of Ed, through a grant to VSAC, 41,225 general fund and 41,225 education fund. And it's for that travel and book stipend for the dual enrollment kids.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it would be easier because there's all this back and forth between the Agency of Education and VSAC around that 82,500. There's all this back and forth between them. They make VSAC write a grant, and it's a straight through appropriation that we make to VSAC, but it goes to the education department. It would be easier for everybody involved if the money went straight to VSAC.
Is it because it's out of the education fund?
Well, it's split between the education fund and the general fund. It's that shared cost.
I know.
And
I'm just wondering if it's done that way because the other half is out of the education fund.
I don't know,
All right.
but
All right. Well, maybe Stephanie, we can look at that if there's something less clunky, which I think is what the.
And I
Yes,
know
what I'm asking
it's an
for
allowed
is
use of the ed fund, so I don't think it's a problem to actually appropriate it directly, even though it is from the ed fund and the general fund. You would still have the reporting underlying. You're talking about the stipend right now,
Yeah.
Yep, just
Yeah.
the stipend.
and you could do it either in the VSAC base, or you could run it as like a 605.1 and just clearly identify the stipend as the piece that's appropriated.
I think that would make it a lot easier for everybody involved.
All right. If we can do it that way, and avoid all these inefficiencies here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Stephanie, you'll make a note of that.
Yep.
All right. And we'll also find out what that 100,000 base reduction
Yeah,
was.
I'll find out. Well, I'll find
maybe
out
it's
why
not
the governor
based.
added it to begin with. You know, what was the increase? Why did he bump it up by 100?
Yeah, I don't know. Why did he bump it up? And we're not taking it. It's not as though it's been in the base being taken out. It was something the governor proposed, but the House didn't agree to it. So it leveled it. Well, we'll find out on that.
It may be the aspiration or the opportunity pieces that they've done in the one time. I'll find out, you know.
That's what I was going to say. If it was increased funding from the governor, it has to be workforce.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Okay, higher ed compact 84,000. Probably can close that out.
Who's the Senate member?
I don't know.
I don't think we ever have had one. I think it's always been the House.
Well, do you want to run?
I don't know, you get elected or get appointed by the
I think-
Speaker.
I think you get appointed by the committee on committee.
Speaker. Well, I don't think the Senate's ever had a member.
Could probably
The
get
advantage
one.
of the compact is it allows Vermont students, right, to access
Yeah, but-
courses.
I'm just talking about the membership, why it doesn't transfer like other things.
Well, do you want us to explore that further, Senator Sears, or are you just making?
You need to take that up with the pro tem.
Yeah, she's in charge of who's in
Uh-huh.
charge of education?
Uh-huh. I think, well, higher ed is Senator Baruth.
Well, Bruce ought to ride that horse and he can get the horse from the Morgan Horse Farm, that dollar horse. that
It's
we're
only
coming to.
$1.
I know.
I want to amend that. I want to make it $2.
I'll let the New England Higher Education Compact go, but I may do an investigation into it.
All right.
Okay.
All
I think
right.
Senator
Find out
Campion,
why we haven't had a senator appointed to that.
I would be willing to bet that Senator Campion is at the root of it.
That would be big headlines if he were.
Oh, that would be the newest one. Senator Campion appointed to
Right,
the New
New
England.
England.
Huh?
yeah,
Well,
Senator
Um,
Sears not appointed.
right. Once again. Sears
Senator-
dissed.
That's right. Senator Sears boxed out. by-
Is this a good place to put back the Morgan Horse Farm? Is this a good place to put back the racing commission?
no,
Now that would be up in general government.
no, that's not a good place. I don't think there'll ever
I
be
think that was
good
a huge
place.
mistake to end the racing commission.
Well, when we get a new racetrack, we'll make a commission.
Yeah.
So Adam just let me know that the $100,000 that was added in BSAC was for aspiration, bringing that base up from 200 to 300. The House pulled it out because they did fund the aspiration program for 3 years at $900,000, so 300 a year out of ARPA in their appropriation in their one-time section. So
Okay.
that's the reason that $100,000 piece was moving in the BSAC line item.
Were they using one-time money?
The governor was not. The House is using 3-time money.
Thank you.
3-time money.
Three
Nice.
time. One
3-time
time.
ARPA money.
But it's not the base.
All right. So now we're down to natural resources.
Yeah.
That's Alice, I believe, 700 in administration. Doesn't seem to be much difference there. Just mostly operating and personal services, which is mostly salary. And so you want to close that out?
Yeah, that one's okay.
I think that's pretty straightforward. Now we have 701. And this has to do with
This is
state
the-
land,
Yeah,
and they added pilot payments related to water quality of $5,653. Where did that come from?
I think that came from just discussion with the House member whose section it was with the agency as an adjustment to the pilot payment. There may be a piece of land that got added that didn't get included
Okay.
in the calc.
Uh-huh. Okay, I assume that's pilot is. All
So
right,
this-
we have different streams of revenue for pilot. I know Senator Sears is going to bring that up from the local option tax.
Yeah,
And then
well,
this
Steve
is-
sent me the information on which communities get pilot money. But he didn't
This
send,
is the state-owned natural resource land, and we restructured this several years ago where it was
Oh.
based on, we
Oh,
had a
okay.
report. It took a couple years it's different than the pilot, the
This is,
oh, the one
this
that goes
is,
to the communities. But I
Yeah.
don't, but he didn't send me the list of which communities are contributing to pilot and how much money's going in. Is it now fully funded by the 30%?
No, it's only about 80, it's about 82% funded. But you
But-
want the list of contributors, not just the getters.
Right,
Yeah.
it was helpful to see the contributors. And it's amazing how much the Bennington gets from the pilot fund, but then rejects the 1% tax in the town, even though that was in the charter. They don't, some things never make sense.
Well, I would say Chittenden County's got quite a bit of, because you've got a number of communities that have voted that local option tax, I think.
Yeah.
Philip, you've got Williston, I think, and Burlington, and
Yeah.
I don't know. Those are big, those would be big.
But our goal when we started this thing was to eventually fully fund the pilot program for the municipalities getting the funding, but also to have it funded through the pilot fund. That was the 30%, so that everybody. So I'm
Everybody
glad that we're
wins.
getting to 82%. That's really great. The goal was to
Okay.
get to 100.
All right, Rich, you got your hand up?
So that pilot is funded through this. This is completely separate. Stephanie, are you telling me that is all of the pilot payments in A&R for state forest land in state parks, is that all done through 701 and
Yeah,
not
so all the payments for A&R owned land is done through 701. And it's we restructured it several years ago because we had some communities that were locked in at current use, other communities that were getting a benefit. And so we've restructured that. And this is just what you see change year to year is going to be the valuation change, but after we got it fully ramped up. And then properties coming into the program, where we.
So my question is, what water quality project I think
it's a piece of land that was associated with a water quality that
okay
came into state ownership.
Okay.
All right, so if Adam is listening, which he obviously is, maybe he can tell us what piece of land came in. But this is, I believe, Stephanie, you and Doug Farnham worked on this project
Several years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I think for $5,653, we will close it out.
And I'll find if Adam doesn't know, Maria probably does. It's probably something that came up in I'm positive it's something that came up in the conversation with the
All right,
House
so
member. Who has this.
Fish and Wildlife, this is really no change from the governor's recommend. It is actually, the governor's recommend is a bit down.
Yeah. Now there's good deal right there. It's down
Yeah.
50 grand.
So it's a very modest,
The one thing that the House did not fund, so you understand, they didn't do the second part of the body cameras in the Fish and Wildlife arena for some reason. So that was in the governor's recommend. We did the initial body camera work in Fish and Wildlife in the budget adjustment, and the governor had a second piece for the body camera acquisition, and the House did not fund that. You don't see it here because it was in the governor's one-time list.
all right, well, we can put that back on our one-time list.
Okay.
Please.
Okay. I'm anticipating Senator Sears' response on that. So, all right, other than the body cameras, it looks pretty straightforward, not much there. We'll close out 702. 703 is Forest Parks and Recreation, the administration. Very little, really, it's a level funded budget there as well. Alice, you all set on that?
Really not much happening here.
No. All right, the forestry, Forest Parks, Forestry. That's up a bit, but not a whole lot. Let's see where the changes are.
A chunk of it's in the grants and most of it is in the personal service line.
Yeah, which is salaries and
And
benefits.
it may be this line item may be one that's impacted by the change in temp out, because there's I don't know if the change we did in how limited the temp employee is by how many hours in a year. We may have more permanent people. I'll double check that, but
And I just asked, what's the special fund money for forest and parks? In the forestry area, I thought it was where they cut wood.
It says
think so,
Forest
that-
Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, but if you look down in the special fund in the revenues, it's got 21,398,000 and it's $1 million. Is that where they put the money from doing logging and in forest and parks?
It probably would be. We'll have to check
Well,
on that.
my problem with that is through COVID, they've suspended all of their or a large portion of all of their logging.
Yeah, but don't forget, this is for 22. Let's be optimistic. They can start logging after July.
Yeah, but
You'll also see transfers into some of the Forest and Park special funds from ARPA money. The governor had it coming from the general fund to shore up those special funds for the lost revenue for a period of time for the past year.
So we're
So
seeing
that's-
that on the one time.
You'll see that on the transfer section when you get to the language.
Okay.
Is that ARPA there, Stephanie?
The
Not
ARPA
here.
will be, what you'll see it is in the one-time transfers of ARPA money. You don't see it here, but because it's related to lost revenue, this House was transferring money into Forest and Park Special Fund.
I see.
The governor had recommended it, but he had recommended out of general fund because his recommendation was prior to ARPA. So
Mhm.
if you're putting the money into the fund, you can see the money coming out here as appropriated.
Okay.
All right, so state parks, once again, pretty modest.
Same state parks.
Mostly personal services operating. And the grants, 70,000 for grants. That was something the governor recommended. There wasn't any the prior year. Do you know what those grants are?
I'm gonna go look at their budget document very quickly.
Well, maybe Adam can shoot you an email, save you
Right.
time. Let's keep going and have him answer it for us. The House did not change it on the state parks,
Right.
but you know what the 70,000 is, Alice?
I don't.
Okay. All right, well, we'll,
I don't see it as a forestry general fund. I don't see it as an up on their budget document right off the bat, which is unusual.
okay, well, I'm sure you'll be getting an email that will give us the answer. I'm gonna suggest we keep going. And close that out when we'll just find out what the 70 is for. I'm sure
Yeah.
if it got past the House scrutiny, it must, they must have really vetted it.
Yeah.
Would that have been to give refunds or something?
No, no,
That would be-
those are, no,
Those would probably net, that you probably wouldn't see that as an appropriation. You'd probably see that net on the,
this is grants,
revenue
it says
side, yeah.
grants. Okay. Well, we can close that out, and if we get information about what it is and people say, well, we don't want to do that, we'll go back and, look at it. Next is Lands Administration, 706. And that's Lands Administration and Recreation. Very little change there.
Okay.
Grants again are up
That's the same.
200, but otherwise it's not a whole lot. It's mostly on the grants have gone up a bit.
Yeah.
and the special fund increase is mostly driven by ATV Sportsman Association. They're anticipating an increase in receipts there.
All right.
That's good. It's the same.
I'm thinking about this. What would really, really be helpful though, because it always is hard. We go back and struggle and try to recollect from a year ago what's included in each of these titles. I wish we would have sort of a summary sheet that
encyclopedia.
would, it's a B706 includes, or whatever. So we don't have to try to go back. I always go back and on the Medicaid, what one is under the waiver and what one's state, and and it's hard to recollect. It would really be nice if we almost had, like you have a sheet that tells you what your acronyms are. It would be nice to have a sheet that says 705 includes.
I actually,
I mean, it shouldn't be too, it's something we could think about putting together in the off session,
Yeah.
Because the description of each budget line is actually in the budget documents every year.
Yeah,
that
I
we
actually
submit.
have it from old budgets that I worked on where I was very detailed, and I wrote that all down of what each thing was included in each one of these.
I know, but it would be nice if we just had a summary sheet for every section of the budget, rather than relying on our notes from prior or our memory, which has been obvious from some of our discussions. It's hard to reconnect on some of this. So it's just something that would be helpful, I think, particularly.
It would be nice.
You can see those of us who have been on the budget for quite a long time struggle to remember what's in this section versus another. So it would be helpful for anyone coming new to the committee as well.
Sure would
And
be.
once again, Forest and Parks Access Road, that's not much there. So I don't see any changes there that would stand out, and the House didn't make any changes, so I think those can
Okay, then.
be okay.
Yeah.
There was no testimony or anything that, that triggers anything other than just, these are pretty standard appropriations.
Yeah,
Let's go to 709, Management and Support Services, Environmental Conservation. So this would be Peter Walk's shop. And that's down just a little bit. And I think probably one of the things he had to do was keep two more positions vacant. I remembered that from his testimony. But I think, and that would be in personal services. That's where that's showing up. And I know that, a couple of people have said, isn't it too bad that those positions can't be filled? But it was how they were able to make their budget come in. And
Well,
we have provided some additional limited service positions, as you know, with
I think
some of the other work.
710 shows that up though, so I think he did fill them maybe.
I don't think so. He's got to keep them to make the budget work. If you look at
Well,
personal services, it's from
yeah.
6.6 down to 6.4.
On 710,
709.
yeah, look at 710 quickly. That's up 8.
Uh-huh.
So that's personal, it looks to me like somebody got moved or something, because that personal services is up quite.
Well,
a
that's
bit.
up a lot more than 2 positions from 17 to 25.
yeah.
Oh, they did some changes. They moved some personnel around from one division to another. So
Yeah,
some of it is just a matter of that movement. The House, all right, this is yours, Alice.
I have this.
Anything there?
So it's the same as the house, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed.
No. And so my point is,
No.
did you see anything that would lead us not to want to concur with the House agreed with the governor's recommend? Is there anything here that we would not simply concur with?
I would say,
Are you still on air and waste? Because this is where the $10 million increase in the special fund that you see is the environmental contingency
No,
fund.
I was on 709, but let's go to
Okay.
let's go to 710 now, since you brought it up. Yes, Stephanie?
So that's where you see that $10 million increase on the special fund line. That's the environmental contingency fund. There's a $10 million transfer into the environmental contingency fund. Half of it will be is used basically for the PCB testing in schools. And the rest of it will shore up the emergency environmental projects or issues that come up. So it's shoring up that fund and
How
covering
did
the PCB.
PCB get funded?
It's in here. It's the testing piece of it is in here. The assessment and testing piece of it is in here.
No, I'm talking about, is this one-time money again?
It is one-time money.
Yeah.
Yes, it was always in the governor's recommend. It was one-time general fund. Here it's ARPA in the House bill.
Um,
but you see that the appropriation of the money is transferred in a different section of this bill. The appropriation is in this line item in 710
Under what? Special funds?
under special funds, because it's it's being fully appropriated out of the environmental contingency fund.
Okay. So it has to be done this way
But
because
why is so much of it going to personnel services?
Because you're probably contracting. It's
Because
not
the
just picking
grants, the
positions.
grants only went up by
Yeah.
$1 million. Personal services are up by
Yeah.
9 million, 8 or 9 million.
Yeah.
The work that they're doing, if it's a contractual arrangement for
I'm
testing.
going to hold that open rather than our attempting to figure it
Yeah.
out. And Adam, if you're listening, if you could help us explain that I know that maybe it's hard to remember. In some cases, you just saw movement of staff from one division to another. So
Yeah.
you were but I don't see a commensurate down on. So I'm thinking we need to understand how, if some of that is what is behind that very significant increase in personal services there.
So they do, in their budget documents, they do provide the net, and the net total across all DEC pieces that are salary and benefits from 21 to 22 is 287, up and down in different funding sources. But the total is 287 across all the pieces between 709, 710, and 711.
Well, where is the commensurate? That's a big up. That's about 7 million up. Where is the commensurate 7 million down to net out to practically nothing that you just talked about?
That I'm talking about the salary and benefits. You don't, on the personal service line, you have contractual
Well,
services
that's
as well.
what
Yeah.
that's I think
Okay.
what we're trying to figure out is
Okay.
what is. I don't think it's because they're adding a lot of staff. That's not my
Right.
impression.
No.
In fact, I think that they're pretty level on staff, or actually are having to hold a couple of positions vacant. I remember the commissioner testifying to that.
Mhm.
So it would be helpful to know what that $7 million is buying or would be used for. And
And there actually is a pretty good detail in their budget document of all the which contracts are going up, which are going down, and I can
Okay.
net them all together for you. They did present it. We can
But-
go line item by line item.
You see,
No.
It's several things that go up and down.
Might be able to get it.
their overall grand total though is up by $15 million.
well, don't forget, if you move that $10 million transfer, that's a big chunk of it.
Yeah.
Well, that's 2/3 of it. Where's the other 5?
I think-
Yeah, there's $15 million somewhere between what we spent and gave them last year,
So
what
so
they're
there's
getting this year.
So I have them up $12 million across all of DEC. You have to,
Well,
if you
it's up-
combine all three appropriations. So
what-
this particular appropriation is 15, but there's others that are down. And so they're up about $12 million, $13 million. And it's $10 million in that special fund, environmental contingency fund, and then $2.7 million on other federal lines. And it's looks like it's a combination of transfer of 900 to Volkswagen settlement dollars, EPA's Lake Champlain Basin grant.
Yeah, but if you go to the last sheet of their document in front of us, where it says totals for natural resources,
Yeah, but that's everything. That's
That's
forest and
everything.
parks.
That's
the
fish and
whole
wildlife
agency.
and forest and parks and everything. I was just talking about environmental conservation alone.
oh, just them alone.
Yes.
So
But they
you're
didn't-
looking at the section total, which is for the entire agency,
Yeah,
not just the
15
DEC.
million more.
Well,
It also
Almost.
includes the Natural Resources Board, which is,
Well, that isn't too much. The House took out $500,000 there.
that the governor had added in his
Uh-huh.
restructuring.
Okay. And the House did add back an Office of Water Programs, the 375. Is that where they, is that where they,
They were
that was the
holding
general
open.
fund?
Yeah. And I think it was in making their total, the vacancy savings piece was increased. I think that's what they're funding here.
So what they're
So you
doing is
have-
buying back?
They're actually filling positions that are, they're not creating new positions, but they're actually providing the funding to fill vacant positions.
Okay, so maybe that was because the commissioner had said it would require holding a higher level of vacancy savings, and I thought he said in filling not 2 positions more. So maybe this you think is buying that back?
It's in this, I don't know that I don't know that it's exactly lined up with a change from last year to this year. It's what they're seeing in a vacancy savings target and saying they're not happy with it and they want to fill 3 of those vacant positions.
They cut the,
So it doesn't match up 1-for-1 with an actual change from 21 to 22.
Okay.
But it's pretty close, I think, between,
I'm going to set that aside for now until we understand it better. It's 221 and what the House did and why they did it. I think maybe that we can get some more background information. Obviously, when you're making these kind of decisions and around general fund priorities, we're going to be having a little more discussion. So
Well,
I'm going to keep that one open.
well, you've also got that's where 5 million of the increase is in the personal services line here. But what I will say is, as we gear up to do all of the water cleanup stuff, and as they begin to send all of the federal infrastructure money down, this is the area that's going to be doing all of the work, and they're going to need some bodies to be able to do that work.
My question, I don't dispute that. And some of that work is going to be time limited to go with those federal dollars. And we probably need to look at limited service. But this, I think, is dealing with what the House must have felt was an unacceptable level of vacancies that that they were seeing in order to have in the governor's proposed budget. So I'm going to suggest we understand it better, and we aren't going to do it in the next 8 minutes. So I'm going to set that aside and see if we can get more information.
It would be just helpful to the underlying governor's budget, the increases in personal, because that comes as a whole package.
Yeah. So 4.97 million of that increase is contracts.
Okay.
And there's a long list of them in the budget documents from the agency,
Awesome. Thank you.
mostly water related projects.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, then you still, will you still hold those positions? I still want to understand them a little better.
You want to understand the House's add back,
Yes,
the House's addition,
Yes.
375.
Yes.
And we'll get that detail. But
Okay.
you're satisfied with the underlying governor?
Yeah, with
change.
what you're talking about with the grants, yes.
you want to know the ones that were dumped?
What?
Do you want to know who was dropped? Wastewater Management Division, 2 in the wastewater direct discharge program and 1 in lakes and ponds to leverage the savings. That's where they went. Those
And
were-
so they're restoring them. They're restoring the funding so they can be filled.
Yeah, it's just that what's hard to say is that you don't actually see a general fund down. You just see them over time holding vacancy savings till you get to a point where
Mhm.
That's all I'm trying. You don't see a governor say, take 375 out for additional vacancy savings. You just see the vacancy savings grow as in the department over time. And they're saying, we want to now fund those.
Okay. All right. Well, I still would like to, so Alice, you know what positions they are.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if we could understand it a little better, that would be good. So I'm going to just let us see if we can get more information on that. Natural Resources Board, that simply backed out the money because they didn't agree with the governor's reorganization proposal.
Yeah.
And that gets us to the total for natural resources. And then we're on to commerce and community development. And I don't know how far we want to go here. We can go through a few of them and try to get them done very quickly. This is all just driven by the Corona Relief Fund of 750 going away. Otherwise, it's pretty much a flat budget for administration. That would be Secretary Curley's office.
So, Madam Chair, I'm just looping back to what I mentioned before about it's the TBED program, the technology-based economic development. Is that, I'm pretty sure that's one-time money.
It was.
It was in the governor's recommend,
Mhm.
and it
Okay,
is
so-
in the House Commerce bill.
So I have time to connect with Becca about that before we get to that discussion.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
And you're saying that wasn't even in the budget, that's in a separate bill, Stephanie?
I believe it's in the House Commerce. It's H159.
Okay.
Oh, because when they came in, they presented it as
Yeah.
their,
But the House decided to allow the Commerce bill to appropriate the dollars as opposed
I
to
see.
keeping it in the budget.
I see, okay.
So this is the base appropriation. It seems pretty straightforward. There's nothing there except they've got $750,000 CRF money that's no longer available. So it's
Mhm.
back to 3.5. Economic development. All right, so I think they removed, the governor was putting in base funding. And what we said was when the bill came through, Senator Brock, and I said, we may have to, we had a separate bill and that we would be using probably one-time money, ARPA or or general fund, depending on what we have. So the House removed base, and I don't think we have base to put into the program. That was the governor's recommend. I think it has been operating on one-time money, and I'm thinking that if we consider it, it will have to be, again, looking at our one-time sources that we have available for that. So what all the House did was they funded it, but or is that coming in the Commerce bill as well, Stephanie?
So I don't think the House bill did. I don't think the House Commerce bill did fund it. I think it's there was a Senate bill, obviously, that passed through us. But as I recall, the House Commerce bill does not have funding for the worker relocation.
Okay. Well, I don't think we can commit to general fund base. I think if we do it, we would look to, we'll put it on our list, but my inclination is to continue the program in the same manner that we have with the one-time funding sources.
We got ARPA funds, why wouldn't we do it there?
Yeah, so I think we would agree not to be committing to base, but what we do have as a commitment is to look at the how we can use some of the one-time resources that we have to continue that program, at least, for another couple more years, and then we'll see, do we still need to recruit people?
So do we hold that or? Okay?
No, we're agreeing we're not putting in base money, that we would be doing it on our one-time list.
Yeah.
Okay, housing and community development. Wow, that's a big change, but that's federal funds, Stephanie, 8 million to 18 million, 10 million, it's all right there.
Yeah, that is probably community development block grant that was in CARES, perhaps. It's what you're
I don't
seeing
know.
there.
Yeah, but
And
it's all federal.
you see it's all running on the grant line.
Yeah, it's all federal.
I can double check, but I'm pretty sure it's CDBG.
Okay,
Because
All
the
right.
CARES Act had two slugs of
Yeah, that's right.
money running on that line.
Okay. So that's all federal dollars that are being reflected there. Tourism and marketing will close out 802, 80, I don't know what happens to 803, 804, and 805, but we're now.
Well,
up to
there was a restructuring in the past, and then it got unstructured where economic development and housing and community got mushed together and then unmushed.
Well, whatever.
That's
It
why the
makes it-
numbering is a little bit. And
Well,
then we did have separate lines that used to be like the community development block grant and
Yeah.
the historic sites. Those are all folded up into the main ACCD line now.
Well, it just makes us appear like we've really made a lot of progress because now we're up to 806. That's my point.
Yeah.
That's tourism and marketing, and that's their base budget, and that's pretty flat.
And the Commerce Bill has the governor had one-time appropriations recommended in the tourism and marketing arena. Those are flowing on the House side in the Commerce Bill.
Okay, all right. So this is just the administration and
Yeah, this is the main.
ongoing
yeah.
work. So that's straightforward. And let's go down to Council on the Arts. That's really,
Boy, that's up a lot.
yeah, that's up a lot, isn't it? So I think we should spend at least a couple hours on that one. And then the Vermont Symphony, the same, is pretty, no changes from the governor's recommend, just flat. I did think didn't they give some one-time money though to Vermont Symphony?
There is one-time money to Symphony. There is the digital investment piece in the arts through the council and the one-time list.
Yeah, but that's out on the other
Yeah.
list. The same as Historical Society, very modest change. It's in grants and
Yeah. That's
and
probably rollout of pay act pressure. It's not
Mhm.
large pay act pressure because most of it was
No.
one time, but yeah.
and then VHCB, we're still the notwithstanding language, or
Yeah.
how did we work that?
So
Okay.
it's the notwithstanding the amount, you'll see it in D100 when we get to the language. And all the one-time, the $40 million is in the general fund one-time
Yes.
list.
Yeah.
for
Okay.
VHCB.
So that keeps that notwithstanding in place, and that's pretty, although there's going to be a lot more money going into housing, obviously, than what 811 is reflecting here. And then the Humanities Council, once again, flat. I don't think we can find much there. And that gets us to transportation. So I think it's at 232, and I will tell you that your transportation committee will be looking very closely, obviously, at this section, and our normal practice is to pretty much defer to their recommendations as it relates to, because this is the funding to go with the plan that's outlined in the T-bill. Senator Westman, you need to go.
Yep, bye. Thank you.
Okay. If you
Bye.
think of it, let Avram know we're thinking of him.
I will do that.
Okay.
I
All
will do
right.
that.
Thank you. So committee, it's 2:33, and we've gotten through to B 900. And so I think this is a good place to adjourn the committee for the week.
Yeah.